Welcome to another episode of Lifting the Lid on Technology. My name is Barry White, your host and VCIO at SoftSource vBridge. This episode is brought to you by HP, advancing workplace performance with AI-driven devices. This week I have a special guest from Microsoft New Zealand in part one of a two-part series, where we talk all things Copilot along with the latest features you can expect over the months ahead. Today, my guest is the illustrious Lauren Nobbs, who is the Partner Solutions Sales Manager for Copilot Global Partner Solutions. Wow, that's a mouthful. Lauren, welcome. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, excited to be part of it today.
Great. Well, no, it's good to have you here. So, Lauren, to kick things off, I thought it'd be great just to hear a little bit more about your role. I know you sort of work right across the country with Microsoft partners and you're talking to customers as well, of course. But keen to get an understanding of what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So as the Copilot Partner Solutions Sales Manager, I work with our partners across Australia and New Zealand on helping them with adopting Copilot within their customers. So I primarily work through our Microsoft partners, but also sometimes directly with customers as well. But my role is really about how we can help customers, across Australia and New Zealand with adopting Copilot and their partners with their strategies around Copilot.
So you mentioned adoption, and I know in my role, I'm talking to customers too about Copilot, and obviously everybody's talking about Copilot at the moment. What sort of feedback are you getting from, I guess, partners and customers alike around Copilot? I mean, how are they going? What are the things they're talking about? What's that feedback like for you?
There's definitely a spectrum in terms of where our customers are sitting and partners on their journey for adopting AI. So some are kind of right at the beginning, just getting started with learning how they can use it in their business. Some are more at the advanced level where they're looking at how to automate full processes with AI. But I think in terms of kind of feedback from customers, when it comes to adopting AI in your organization, it's quite different to other technologies. So it's not like we can tell a company, this is how you use it, click here, do this, turn on this setting. You're effectively given this blank box of opportunity to use AI to help with your productivity. So definitely adoption and change management is so critical to the success of adopting within an organization. We see a lot of partners or customers, buy licenses and just leave them there and let people kind of play with them on their own, but that's just not as effective. You need to have quite a clear adoption strategy and roll out. So you're rolling out to people with materials to teach them how to use it with defined use cases so you can measure success and things like that.
Have you seen sort of differences between, here in New Zealand, I guess we could say we're predominantly an SME country compared to Australia, which I know you work across as well. But have you noticed sort of differences between that? Are these smaller organisations, I'm sort of thinking in the sort of 50 to 300 seat sort of range, do they sort of view this differently to the more enterprise customers, or are they the concerns there or the challenges the same?
I definitely think that when it comes to enterprises, they're probably more ahead of the game in terms of having governance around AI. So more ahead on the things like having policies, having security around it. But we are seeing in the SMB space faster adoption. So I think there's a misconception with Copilot that the most of the adoption has happened in the customers that have larger organizations, but I've actually seen at the moment in Microsoft's SMB segment, which is not just like a New Zealand SMB, that's just like it's a lot bigger than that. But we actually see most of the Copilot seats be in the SMB or in the smaller customers because they're able to kind of more quickly and rapidly get that into the organization, but then they need to get that kind of security and governance to follow.
Do you think that's because smaller businesses are more pragmatic? Like, I guess they don't have the same barriers that maybe some of the larger customers do. And I guess they've, dare I suggest, are probably less concerned about some of the security implications of AI. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm interested in your thoughts on that. But do you think it's just because it's been driven more from the top down? You've got company CEOs and people in the SLTs kind of become the first adopters and they tend to be quite forward thinking, so they try to bend and twist it to do what they want to do. Do you think that's the reason, or is it more simplistic than that?
I'd agree with both. I think the readiness piece is a big part of it with larger customers and with global customers to do that like security readiness part of checking data security and permissions prior to rolling out Copilot takes a lot longer if you're dealing with a really large amount of data and a lot of historical information. So it does take longer usually for our large customers to complete that process with, in SMBs or smaller customers. They often have less data, and so it's a bit easier to kind of get through that process.
So you've talked a bit there about security and compliance. When I talk to customers, and particularly those that have perhaps been early adopters and used, some of the other tools that are out there in the market, they're perhaps not really clear on what it is exactly differentiates Microsoft from perhaps some of those services. What are some of the key things that you think that organisations should be thinking about when they're using these tools? Because, I've seen first-hand cases just horrify me where, businesses are pasting things into these tools which, probably they shouldn't be, right?
Yeah.
What's kind of Microsoft's secret sauce here, if you like, and what is it that kind of distinguishes Copilot perhaps from some of these other services?
The biggest concern that I talk about is visibility. And you're absolutely right. We've seen a lot of things in the headlines. There's memes all over social media about uploading sensitive data to get AI to rewrite your email, things like that. So it's absolutely a big issue. Visibility is probably the most important thing that organizations need to be aware of, is having visibility of what AI tools people in your organization are using, what they're using it for, what are those tools, who are those people, having that visibility. Because there's been such a rise of adoption in the consumer AI space, the lines are blurred between what we're using for consumer AI, what we're using for business, and people are using consumer tools for business purposes. Consumer tools don't have that same security behind them. When it comes to Copilot, both Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is the paid product, and also Copilot Chat, which is the included product in your existing core Microsoft licensing, has enterprise data protection. So this effectively means a lot of things. It means that, one, the security commitments and contractual commitments around your data are the same as what you have for Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive, all of those other services in terms of what we commit to. And also the model never trains on your data. So that's really important. It means that no other Microsoft customer or no one publicly is able to access your data that you feed into Copilot. And even though other kind of consumer tools don't directly have access into your business data, employees can feed it into that by either uploading files or pasting information in, things like that. So once it's kind of uploaded, that becomes a risk. But with Copilot, when you put anything in, it's not training that model. So you're always secure from that perspective.
Yeah. I think that enterprise data protection is, again, this is just my observation talking to clients, is probably the thing that many don't really fully appreciate. If you don't have users on the Microsoft 365, paid subscription, as you say, everybody else should be using let's call it the free version, because of that enterprise data protection, right? Because, at least as you say, you get that visibility benefit that you've been talking about, which you don't get if you're using one of these other tools. And I think that alone is a kind of a baseline starting point, particularly depending on what that organisation does. If they're, for example, I was talking to an organisation just this morning in the clinical space, right? And I was quite concerned about the number of different publicly available cloud services they were using inside a hospital environment. I thought, wow, have you thought about the privacy implications around that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
yeah, completely agree. We have a lot of conversations with customers now where we're saying, because this, people have kind of had free rein just starting to use these tools, whether the company knows about or not. A lot of customers are in a position where they're no longer compliant with their industry regulations and things that they need to be compliant with because of this. So it's something we have to get on top of quite quickly. Then another thing as well, when it comes to, again, back to that visibility, different tools are trained on different data as well. And large language model, these models, they take on flavor of the data that they're trained on. So if there is bias present in that data, or if you're building one internally and there is, that's going to be reflected in the output. So it's these other considerations that, is the information, is it unbiased, is it accurate, all these things. So visibility of what models and what the data is trained on is really important too.
That's a good segue into another question I had for you, which is this idea of ethical AI development and what that actually means. And you've sort of touched on that bias aspect, because I don't think a lot of people realise, the training of these models can, as you say, embody certain views on the world for whatever reasons. And what's Microsoft's promise there, and how does Microsoft talk about that moving forward?
When it comes to Microsoft, we have our responsible AI framework. So at the foundation, right, of Microsoft services, it's all built on trust. And part of that is responsible AI. So it's making sure that our models are as unbiased and as ethical as possible. So we have a lot of guardrails around what kind of responses that Copilot as our product is able to provide to make sure that there is going to, produce any material that is biased or that is inaccurate or that is unethical in any way. We have a whole red team to focus on doing things like prompting to try and test and make sure that there's no way you can get around that with prompt jailbreak attacks and things like that. You can get around that and get our models to produce something that would be unethical.
I know I've done this myself, and to anybody listening to this podcast, if you want a little bit of entertainment one evening, pick a controversial subject of your choice and try and have an argument with an AI. You'll very quickly get to a point of understanding of what that actually means. And if you get particularly obnoxious, it might actually cut you off. So, it's a little bit of a fun challenge there. Hey, Lauren, I was really keen to talk to you today, about agents, because, a year ago, it was all Copilot and productivity and all that sort of stuff. But now we've got this term of, agentic AI, which I call it the sound of. Maybe you could explain for our listeners the difference between agents and, say, a Copilot, which is really a bot, right?
I'm super excited about agents, and you're right. We're talking about 2025 all being about the year of agentic AI. When it comes to agents, we can think about Copilot being a assistant for a human, and it's that one-to-one relationship. So our vision is that every human has a Copilot, and that's their personal AI assistant. And then we have agents, which are for processes, and they are a one-to-many relationship. So multiple people can use it for a process. So the vision, Copilots for our humans, agents for our processes. And with agents, we can really start to get or improve productivity for entire teams and for entire organizations. So Copilot is really centered around individual productivity, so helping people with their day-to-day work and their tasks and time-consuming, help them work more efficiently and save time. With agents, we're able to help customers get more value across the business. So things like automating processes, there's different types of agents. So there's kind of a spectrum again of how complex they are. So we have on the more simple end, we have retrieval agents. So they are agents that are trained or they're focused on specific data sources. So they are really good for providing specific knowledge around a topic. And then we have right on the other end of the more complex end, we have autonomous agents. So that's where they can complete entire end-to-end business workflows without there needing to be human involvement triggering that. Or they can go to a certain point and then kind of reach back out to the human where they need some involvement.
Yeah, that's starting to get probably a little bit unnerving, isn't it? That we've got agents now that are operating without actually consulting with us and may go off and do their own thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to change the role, I think, for us as humans a little bit. But, the whole purpose of this is not about replacing humans, and we always talk there needs to be a human in the loop managing this, but we will see, as this technology kind of goes more in that way, and we're talking a bit about things like multi-agent systems at the moment where you can have teams of agents that all have different roles and functions within an organization that can work together to complete a goal. But humans can start becoming more like agent managers, but it allows them to be focused on more strategic work. And then again, we're using these agents to help with that time-consuming, mundane work, but not to replace humans, but to allow us to be more strategic and creative.
So do you think in the future, when we go and apply for jobs, it won't be so much important as to how many people you've managed in your previous role, but how many agents you used to manage, right?
Good point. Possibly, yeah. I do think, we've seen already AI skills, like prompting skills are in so many, I can't remember the exact stat to my head, but it's present in so many job descriptions at the moment. I think about this a lot where we encourage organizations around how they need to skill their employees. And I think this is really important that organizations understand they also have a responsibility to their employees to set them up for the future. And that is going to involve having skills around how to use AI, how to manage agents, how to prompt, things like that.
Thanks for joining us for part one of this two-part series. Tune in next week where I will continue my conversation with Lauren Nobbs from Microsoft New Zealand. See you next time.